traces from the disposal. The nanodroids were in the food.
Well, I guess the question now is, did he eat them willingly, or did someone feed them to him?
What are you doing here?
We've learned Jakar was involved in the bombing.
That can't be true.
See if she has any nanodroids on her, Ahsoka.
Nanodroid?
She's clean.
What do you mean, nanodroids?
We believe someone set Jakar up and made him the bomb.
I don't understand.
Lila, I want to bring you in for more questioning. Maybe you can help us make sense out of all of this.
I'll answer any question I can.
Stop! Take the high road.
Right, Master.
Let me go!
Running means you know more than you're telling us.
Jakar is dead, and now you're trying to blame his murder on me.
Nobody ever said he was dead.
But running proves you had something to do with the bomb.
You don't know what you're talking about.
People blamed just because of you. People were killed because of you.
You can't.
Hey there.
Hey, DJ, you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Hey, Cornel, can you hear me?
Hey, Nigel. Yeah, I can hear you. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I was making sure that my mic was working there.
Yeah, I was doing the exact same thing. I was like, well, different desktop setup upstairs and downstairs, so I figured I should probably hop on early just to make sure everything's smooth butter.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, DJ.
Awesome. Sweet.
So
Hey,
Loretta is not going to be able to join us. Just
Not
ahead.
sure I've had a chance to meet you yet. My name's Cornel Preez.
Nice to meet you. I'm DJ. I work with Nigel sometimes, just on the side, you know.
On the ISSA stuff.
Hey, Nigel, real quick, while we're on a couple of minutes early, do you mind if I share my screen for a sec? I just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
hold on a second. Would you stop the recording there, DJ? And we'll kick it back off when the meeting starts.
Yeah.
So that way we're now whatever we're sharing off. Hey everyone, and welcome to the August ISSA Columbus, Georgia chapter meeting. With us today we have Cornel, who's going to go over an SDLC DevSecOps, how to put the sec in DevSecOps and not crash and burn. I may have said that wrong, Cornel. My apologies if I did. And soon we'll be kicking off the elections for next year. So guys, keep that in mind that that's coming up, and we'll be kicking that off and starting the nomination process for anybody who wants to be an ISSA officer. I am more than welcome to bring you on board and get you up to speed on what it takes to be a president here at the ISSA organization here in Columbus. But we appreciate everybody for jumping in, and those of you who are watching outside of this time frame, we appreciate you guys coming in here and watching it. And with that, I will pass it off over to Cornel.
Awesome. No, that sounds great. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you for the introduction, and obviously for the invitation to get to come here and or virtually come here and speak for the Columbus ISSA chapter again. I know it's been quite a while. I think it's been at least a year, maybe 2 years since I last got to speak with this group. So, like I said, always a pleasure to be invited back. So, real quick, guys, let me go ahead and reshare my screen. Give me a moment. Back over here, share. All right. Okay, great. And Nigel, if you just want to give me a quick sanity check, you guys can see the screen in presentation mode, is that right?
Yes, looks great.
Awesome. Okay, so like Nigel said, this presentation is going to be around the DevSecOps world of security. So this just means at a high level, right? You've got your traditional, you know, when you think of information security teams at an organization, oftentimes those teams are primarily concerned with, hey, what's going on the network, right? What's going on our perimeter, and what's going on in the internal network, which is great. That's what you want. But other times, depending on the organization, what it's up to, you know, if it's building applications or building products, you may also have a specific group in security called product security. So again, oftentimes those are the guys and the gals charged with making sure that the products and the applications, the APIs, all that good stuff is being built in a secure and proper manner. And as it's being deployed, that, you know, the organization is not taking on undue risk. So this presentation is going to talk a little bit about that and how security can be embedded into your typical DevOps. It's called the CI/CD pipeline. You guys are, you know, I'm sure obviously familiar with that. That's the continuous integration, continuous deployment, or continuous development cycle, right? That's a pipeline, which just means that as developers are building software, all the way from the initial, you know, planning and requirements through the development phase, and then ultimately into deployment, what does that pipeline look like, right? Typically your bigger organizations want to make sure that's being done in a frictionless manner, right? While you're building products, the last thing the development team wants is for everything to come grinding to a halt, so that there can be a penetration test or, you know, a last minute security, you know, roadblock that says, hey, wait a minute, what do you mean you're trying to go to production? You haven't consulted us at all. We're going to have to put you through all the different, you know, security checks, those hurdles. So with that being said, hopefully that was a decent overview of what we'll be talking about here today. But I guess real quick, I wanted to talk about this. I don't like listening to myself talk a whole lot. So when I say that, I want you guys to collaborate, right? The PowerPoint is only like 13 or 14 slides. I do not believe in death by PowerPoint, but unfortunately, this being a virtual meeting, this is just one of those things. It's a tool to facilitate the discussion, but I do mean that. It is a discussion. So like I said, 13 or 14 slides. I'm not going to try to ramble too much, but what I would really like is for you guys to ask me questions, right? I'd love to hear, you know, challenges you're facing in your organizations, and obviously be happy to provide some input into what I've seen or what I know works versus maybe what doesn't work. All right. So I'm sorry. Any questions before I get started? And I am drinking coffee, so I'll be having a few sips through the presentation.
Is this specific to any platform, or is it pretty much any platform?
I try to, great question. So I try to not get stuck in a groove tied to any particular platform. So, you know, that being said, a little bit about Breako Security. I'll keep it brief. We are vendor agnostic, right? So all of my presentations, all the consulting that we do as a firm tries to not say, hey, you have to do it this way, or hey, we prefer you do it this way. It's really, you know, what does the organization need, and what has it already adopted, and how can we make that work for security? Good question. Did I answer the question, Nigel, or was there something more specific?
No. Yes, that was the question.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling. All right, a little bit about me. I'm not going to read all these slides to you guys. I'll just kind of use them as talking points. So that's me to the right. I am South African, so that kind of explains why I'm busy feeding an elephant in this picture. But I do come from a very technical background. So I've been in information security now for, I don't know, 11 or 12 years, something like that. So I've kind of, I've worked my way through all the different ranks, right? So I've gotten to do a good bit of blue team, good bit of red team, you know, working in some of the bigger enterprises, you know, all the way into consulting. I've been consulting for quite a few years now, and currently I am the founder and the managing director at Breako Security. So some of my non-technical hobbies are bass fishing, ballroom dancing, traveling, and you know, just reading in general. I'm kind of a bookworm, but yeah, it's not often you run into somebody who enjoys playing rugby and enjoys ballroom dancing. Those are just a few things you don't often hear in the same sentence, but that's just kind of the way it is. Those are the things I enjoy doing.
How about cricket? Do you play cricket?
Oh, great question. Yeah, cricket. So South Africa is also known for playing cricket. And that was just one of those things as a kid. I never got into cricket, you know, just like, you know, here in the US, I never really got into football. I always just kind of strayed towards rugby. So, but you know, my dad was an avid cricket player, so I respect the sport for sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and I was going to say, there's a QR code bottom left. So if you don't want to listen to me ramble, then, you know, just hit that QR code. It's actually just going to take you to the Who Am I page, or I'm sorry, the About Us page on Breako Security's website. So feel free to look that up. There's probably a little more information if you'd like to know more about credentials and stuff like that. All right, so that being said, you're probably wondering, okay, well, what do you actually do other than playing rugby and ballroom dancing and feeding elephants? Those are fair questions. So let's talk about a little bit more specific to information security. So some of the prior roles that I've had included being the principal pen test architect at Honeywell, based out of Atlanta. So I was pretty much charged with figuring out how offensive security should be embedded in the product security development lifecycle. So that's kind of a mouthful, but all that means is pretty much what I'm presenting on here today is exactly what I was doing at Honeywell. So, and I got to define that for the organization. So quite a bit of responsibility, but really was excited and happy to see just the overall adoption and success that we had, and taking a look at the metrics and reporting from when I got there to when I left. It was just, it was amazing to see how we were able to have essentially a cultural shift, right? A change in the culture, not just in the developers or the software engineers, but even through to the operations team. Security no longer was seen as the adversary. We were seen as the partner. So really had a good time working at Honeywell. Some of you, if you've seen my previous presentation for this ISSA chapter, I was still at Stalwart Systems. They later became North State Technology Solutions, and now I believe it's Segra. but I was the senior security consultant at that group. And so again, just doing offensive security assessments for quite some time. And then prior to that, I was working at a LexisNexis Risk Solutions, which was just a really big risk and data analytics company based out of Alpharetta. So I already talked a little bit about some of these responsibilities, but I was in charge of leading the product security team at Honeywell. And again, you can kind of flip through some of those notes down there and see what I was asked to do in those different roles. If you take a look at the picture on the right, so I've actually been involved with ISSA for quite some time. I did a presentation at the ISSA International Conference a couple of years ago, presenting on AWS cloud security. So a little bit more about Abrico Security. We do specialize in offensive security. We are a full security consulting shop, but offensive security is one side of the house. The other side of the house is cloud security. So those are really my two passions. And again, you'll pick up some of that here today. All right, let's keep rolling. So the agenda I have for this presentation is it's pretty cut and dry here, but I want to talk a little bit about the purpose of the secure software development lifecycle, and then we would dig into the 6 phases of that SSDLC. So just wanted to kind of put this out there in front of you guys so you kind of know what to expect as we roll through this. Yeah, again, should be a pretty short presentation. So don't hesitate to stop me and ask any questions if you have those. All right, so here we go. This is the, I think this is a brilliant question to start the presentation out with, which is, what is the purpose of security in a DevOps pipeline, right? What in that CI/CD pipeline? Why are we trying to cram security into this thing? Is a penetration test not enough when this product is ready to go live? So it's kind of a loaded question, to be honest. But when you go around and you ask and you talk to developers or operations engineers and you bring up security when it comes to releasing products, right, applications or IoT devices, kind of unanimously you'll hear product security is great, but it's always a roadblock. It's always a roadblock. It's right before we're trying to go live. You know, the product owners have been, you know, busting their rear, trying to make sure everything is getting done in time. Ultimately, right, their feet are being held to the fire by leadership to get these products ready to go and ready to start generating revenue. So again, I talk about that because the purpose of security in all this is that we should be minimizing the risk to the business. And that one kind of goes without saying, right? Everyone's kind of just shaking their head like, yeah, okay, we get that. That's obviously the purpose of security. But the second bullet here, I also think is just as, if not more important, it should be a product differentiator, right? If you're baking in security into your products, then use that as a selling point when you're talking to your customers, to your clients. If they're comparing you to the competition and say, well, what makes you different? Why are you different, right? Why should I partner with you instead of these other guys? Okay, well, lay it on thick. Talk about security. Say, hey, look, we're following an extremely mature, you know, just a very modern DevSecOps practice, and these are the steps that we're taking to make sure that our products are secure and that you're not going to be the next big headline breach because of, you know, vendor risk. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation here. But the last bullet here is, if it's done right, we should be expediting the overall time to market. Meaning, there shouldn't be the last minute, hey, quick guys, we got to do a pen test so we can get this website published or this product, you know, goes live. I mean, and a lot of us have been there, right? If you have that pen test done last minute, guess what's going to happen? It's going to be Swiss cheese, right? That thing is going to be full of holes. If you haven't baked security in from the get-go, that pen test, if it's done by, you know, proficient pen testers, they're going to say, holy cow, there's, you know, vulnerabilities all over the place. You guys didn't architect this securely. You didn't plan for all these vulnerabilities that have arisen, right? So if you bake it in rather than trying to bolt it on at the end, it should it should expedite the overall time to market, right? Let's roll on here. So this brings us to the phases of the SSDLC, right? And essentially the picture and the numbers to the left are kind of communicating the same thing. The reason I threw in the picture to the right is because I want to make it clear that this is cyclical, right? Meaning we start with security training and we work our way through the requirements, through the planning and design. The software engineers begin developing the product or the applications. Security comes in, QA teams come in, we do the verification and testing, and then ultimately this product will be released and maintained. Now, if this is any modern organization, chances are that product is going to have multiple releases, right? Even it doesn't matter if we're talking agile, if we're talking waterfall, this product is more than likely, unless it gets sunsetted, this product is going to have multiple major revisions. And this shouldn't be, you shouldn't start all over again and ignore anything or everything that's already been done. You need to keep, the organization needs to learn from its mistakes and it needs to build on its proficiencies, right? Security should be an ongoing process. We always say security is it's a journey, not a destination, right? So real quick, I'm going to take just a quick breather here. Like I said, I do get to talking and talk a little fast sometimes. So I'm going to pause real quick before we get into these each one of these phases, and I just wanted to get a quick a check on the audience. Does what I've said so far make sense to everybody? I mean, are you guys familiar with this, or is anybody just like, wow, what is this? This is totally out there.
I mean, this is DevOps, right? Like that's the, I mean, with adding security in there at the top of the training, this would be considered DevOps. And are we suggesting that we're going to go through and put security at every step, or is there?
Exactly right. Yep. No, that's you're exactly right. It is. It's DevOps. We've pre-pended security training onto that, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is. But you're exactly right. We will be going through each one of these phases and talking about the role of the product security team, how we should be engaging and embedding ourselves, so that again we're not seen as the roadblock towards the end. Cool. Just want to make sure didn't put everybody to sleep already. So all right. We'll keep rolling here. I did try to sprinkle some pictures through here, but my meme game is not too strong today. You know, I ask for your mercy. Let's talk about security training, right? When I say security training, I think probably everybody in the audience just rolled their eyes, right? Who wants security training? Chances are everybody's already being forced to do security training on an annual basis anyway. And let's face it, nobody enjoys doing it. That's not the security training that I'm talking about here. When I say security training in the context of DevSecOps, I'm specifically talking about the product development teams, right? Those software engineers. Think about it in the context of, hey, we haven't started building this application, or hey, we're getting ready for a next big release, a next major release. Before we even talk about what's involved in that release, let's go ahead and talk about security right up front, right? Security should be involved in these conversations. And if you take a look at the slide here, right, more often than not, it's ignored, it's prioritized. But the last bullet I have under that first section there is it's viewed as a disciplinary measure, which I think is the absolute worst thing that you can do to the organization, especially when we're talking about the culture, right? The perception of the product security team can't be, hey, we did a pen test a couple months ago on your last big release and it was a bloodbath. So because of that, we're forcing you guys to go through security training. If you do that, you've totally severed that relationship with the developers and then also the, you know, possibly the operations teams. So what I'm proposing is that, hey, we can use those security assessments, those prior pen tests, as a guide for the curriculum, but don't use it as a hammer, right? Take a look at those reports and figure out, hey, what were kind of what were the systemic issues we noticed when we were conducting pen tests developed by the software team, right? Let's take a look at that. Let's figure out what programming languages are we using? What infrastructure do we already know that we're going to be using? And knowing those things, the programming languages, the infrastructure, let's have that and I understand COVID makes this difficult, but it needs to be an in-person training session. This isn't something that you can just send off to them and say, hey, this is a checkbox thing, just walk through this training and you'll get a little certificate of completion once you're done. That is compliance driven security training, and that does not, and you guys know this, that doesn't make an organization more secure, certainly not its software. If we're taking security seriously, then we should be having training in person, right? And I get it, with COVID, it probably has to be virtual like this, but it should be engaging, right? We should be asking developers, asking engineers questions. Hey, are you clear on what it is that we're talking about? And if you're fortunate enough that you have the resources for it, or if you're going to bring in a consulting team to do it, it should be hands-on. That's how developers want to learn. They don't just want to listen or to see somebody do it. They want to get their hands on the keyboard, right? So if you take a look at the references down here, I've listed a few of the different programming languages that we encounter quite often. The only thing I didn't list for some reason was ASP.NET. But what I found really good success with in the past is, hey, let's spin up these intentionally vulnerable applications, right, that are being hosted or being written in the same programming languages. And then let's go through, let's do just a live demo. Hey, we're going to exploit SQL injection. Hey, we're going to trigger cross-site scripting, or whatever that may be. Let the developer see it, see you do it, and let them look at the code and see why those vulnerabilities exist. That's the way that you conduct developer training, and that's what resonates with them, right? And I don't suggest using their application because, again, then you might just be, it may come off like you're pointing the finger at the developers, which is certainly not the intent, not what we want to do. So this was security training. Before we roll into the next phase, does everyone kind of get what it is that I was trying to communicate here? Or do you guys have any questions? I know I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm sure we've all had horrible security training encounters, but do you guys, is this all clear? Have you had success? Have any of you tried doing this in-person security training before with the developers?
No, the only security training I've seen is more about like the compliance check that you mentioned. It's using software, how to use this software to determine vulnerabilities in your compilations of your software,
right?
Syntax or that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a good point. So we are going to talk about some of those softwares here in a little bit during the testing and verification phase. But yeah, you're right. A lot of it is just when it's audit or when it's compliance driven like that, man, people's teeth just cringe, right? I mean, they're not paying attention. And you know this, people are just clicking that button, right? Waiting for the page to refresh, click that button. So anyway, yeah, I can commiserate there. We've all been there and done that, unfortunately.
I think a lot of that has to do with the direction where it comes from. When somebody says there's a requirement for security training, it tends to get ahead of a lot of security teams, and then they end up with checkbox security instead of the really built-in start to finish training for those users who are using or who are developing. Right.
No, you're absolutely right, and that actually brings me. It actually leads us great into this next slide, which is we'll get there here in 1 second. But before I do get there, Nigel, you brought up a great point, and it's something that I actually glossed over. I didn't emphasize it, and that's, guys, everything, all of this. If product security is something that's being taken seriously at an organization, or if it needs to be taken seriously, it all starts with leadership buy-in, right? If we don't have leadership buy-in, we have nothing, right? There's no teeth to the program. We can't enforce security if it's not being driven from the top. So again, Nigel, thanks for bringing that up. And that is what sets the pace, right? Either we're doing this for compliance or we're doing it because we take security seriously, and we want it to be that market differentiator for our products. Great point. All right, and one last thing there is when we talk about how can we enforce product security, it's there's three ways to enforce it, right? And we should be adopting a blend of all three, and that's the people, the policy, and the technology. So the people, it's a cultural thing, right? Which is exactly what we're talking about here, the security training. Policy, there has to be governance. If there's no policy to back up what we're preaching or what we're asking, we're kind of at a loss there. And then finally, there's the technology. So, and that's really putting those controls into the CI/CD pipeline. And we'll talk about those here in a minute. So, all right, the requirements phase. Man, this thing gets overlooked all over the place. So organizations that I've worked with in the past, this is one of those things when I ask about, hey, can you tell me about the requirements phase? Did you do a privacy impact assessment? What frameworks are we aligning with? What did you build to? A lot of times security is not involved in those discussions, and it's a shame, right? We should be involved in those discussions, especially around privacy. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones that I can outline here. But also organizational policy. A lot of times, product security is not necessarily a new thing. There's probably already existing governance in place that says, hey, when we're building products, we need to meet these thresholds, right? We need to have these standards in place for our products, and that may be, password complexity requirements. That may be, hey, these are the software components that we're allowing our developers to use. They can't deviate from that. All sorts of things, right? There needs to be some sort of guidance up front. So typically, when we talk about the requirements phase, when you talk to developers about the requirements phase of the SDLC, they'll say, oh yeah, that's when the business tells us, hey, this is what we need you to build. That's fine, and that should stay that way. But we should also be talking about the ante requirements, which is, this is what we shouldn't be building. When we're designing this application, there are specific functionalities that should be excluded or that should be explicitly not allowed in the application or in the product. So we call those evil user stories in the agile world. So, and that sounds kind of funny. I got Dr. Evil on the right here, but the evil user stories, if you do have an agile environment, all that is, when we talk about user stories, it's a task, right? Something that you assign, or a ticket that you assign to the developers. So typically those are, they'll talk about the role and what they should be able to do. So they'll say, as a developer, I should be as a user, I should be able to authenticate into our, banking application or whatever it is that we're building. An evil user story is specific to the product or the application, and it involves understanding what the overall application is going to have to do based on the business requirements. But the evil user story would be phrased as a user, I should not be able to log in and query Nigel Miller's bank account, right? I should only be able to see my own. And if you define that as a ticket or to do or as a story, and you assign those to the developers, it kind of lets them wear the black hat for a little bit, or the gray hat, right? So as they're building the product, they can check these things off as they validate them as they're building it. And what this does is it's really powerful. It's incredible. Whenever we get around to the penetration test, it should be pretty difficult to find a lot of the low-hanging fruit, right? And especially some of the non-low-hanging fruit, some of the business functionality, the logic vulnerabilities. Those are the ones that can be remediated way up front before they ever get baked into the application, right here in the requirements phase. So this is a manual part, right? So I know we're talking about DevSecOps here, specifically about the pipeline. But when we discuss secure software development, this can't be ignored. So unfortunately, this part is not automatable, or yet, right? I'm sure there will be a day when this gets automatable, but at a bare minimum, when they're designing the overall, hey, these are the steps of building this product, or the epic and agile terminology, we could create phase gates that says, hey, engage with security to have the requirements phase of the SSDLC before you can move on to the next phase, right? So not fully automatable, but it's certainly something that can be enforced. All right, any questions on the requirements phase? Nothing.
Say the evil user stories. That is a fantastic way of describing it. That tends to be one of the things that when I used to review applications, I would use that. Unfortunately, it was later in the process, so it was causing delays for software. But yeah, defining that early would be great.
Yep. No, and that's awesome. I'm glad to hear other people have tried this out and have seen success with it. I will say, especially prior roles that I've had, seen just phenomenal results from that. And it's also kind of like the hands-on training. Developers, they don't just despise security for the sake of us being security. If we approach them as, hey, we're trying to partner with you, we're actually trying to make your lives easier, right? We're trying to help you succeed by getting this product released, on its timeline. If you approach them that way and you talk to them, hey, let's get you involved in security, they generally, they're open to it. Developers they're curious by nature. They enjoy engineering. They enjoy learning. So if you teach them a little bit about security around evil user stories, I've seen a lot of excitement around it. So, one last thing here at the very bottom, you'll see these references on each slide. I'll talk about some of this stuff. So I didn't mention it, but there is the OWASP ASVS, and that's the Application Security Verification Standard. What that is it's essentially a list. It's a guide for, hey, as you're building software, these are the security checks that you should be putting into your software, right? These are general security guidance that pretty much any developer can read and understand and immediately begin to implement into their products. Also, the URLs were too big to fit on the slides, so I shortened them with tiny URL, and you'll just have to trust me on this. I promise it's not a malicious link. You can click on it. But anyway, so if you're wondering why those are tiny URLs, that is the reason. All right, let's keep rolling. So the planning and design, again, similar to requirements, this is just something that I often see get skipped. And I believe the reason for that is because, again, it is manual by nature, right? And so because it's manual, you generally see this being done at a more mature organization, right? Maybe a small to medium-sized organization doesn't necessarily have the capacity on the product security team to be able to do all of this manual work. But again, the investment you see on time is the payoff is significant, right? So when I talk about planning and design, specifically when I think of how does security fit into the planning and design phase, normally when you encounter the software developers, the engineers, and they're in the planning and design phase, they're thinking about, hey, okay, so these are the infrastructure components we have. This is the single sign-on solution that we have. These are the servers that we're going to be using, or maybe it's Kubernetes, maybe it's AKS, maybe it's ECS, whatever that may be. They understand the infrastructure that they're going to be using, right? These are the APIs that we're going to be integrating with. Now we start to decide, okay, what does the software composition look like, right? What are the libraries we have to use? What are the frameworks we have to use? And so this is an awesome chance for security to be involved in the discussion, right? It doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out discussion, but all we're looking for here is, hey guys, do you mind if we sit down and we hash out a threat model of what this looks like, right? And obviously, the more familiar the security team is with, the infrastructure and the general building practices of the organization, the quicker this will be. Especially as the relationship between the development team and the security team grows over time. This will be less and less cumbersome, right? But what we try to do as security is we engage with them and say, hey guys, both the development team and the operations team, we say, can we talk about what this looks like on paper, right? Keep in mind, we haven't actually written a single line of code yet. If you take a look to the right here, this is what's called the threat model, and I refer to it in the references here. I actually used OWASP Threat Dragon. I'm a big fan of OWASP. They actually have a free tool that allows you to do this, right? And all this is this is a visual representation of the product and everything that it interacts with, right? Which is, if you think about it from a security perspective, that's extremely powerful to be able to look at this before a single line of code has even been written. Because what this does is it allows us to have these conversations around, hey guys, we know the API server has to communicate with the database server over here, right? The green dotted line may be this is a crossing of a subnet in the network that's firewalled off. Can we talk about those firewall rules between the API server and the database server, right? Are we doing any IPS between the API server and the database server? So again, it allows us to ask some of these questions. And what I really like about Threat Dragon, I put a demo diagram and report down there for you guys to go check out. What's cool about it is it doesn't just provide you the threat model, it also provides a report, which obviously it's highly customizable for you as the security practitioner, but that report lists all the different components that we have drawn here, right? And the different actions that are happening. And then based off of that, we can talk about, hey, these are the general security vulnerabilities associated with these components. These are the things we need to make sure that we're addressing now before we even build the product, right? Let's bake security in now so that we're not trying to bolt it on at the end. Anyway, sorry, a whole lot of talking there, but does this kind of make sense? How security should be engaging here? I want to make sure I'm not overly vague, right? But just generally, when I've done this in the past, we typically try to get the product owner. We'll bring in the product owner. We'll bring in the software engineering team, and we'll bring in the operations team. So those are kind of the stakeholders that you definitely want to make sure you have represented in the room whenever you have these discussions. I feel like I should start talking about cricket again. I think that sparked more conversation. All right, well, let's keep rolling here. Quick time check. How are we doing, Nigel? We're at 6:14.
We have about 15 minutes.
About 15. All right, we'll make
and
sure.
we would like to leave about 5 minutes to ask questions if possible.
Definitely. Well, and the good news is the rest of this is very intuitive, right? For the most of it, you guys have seen and experienced the majority of it. So next we're getting into the development phase, and I think I only have a couple of slides left actually, but we'll make sure we leave some time at the end here. Development phase, guys, this is where all the automation comes in, right? Which is probably counterintuitive to what most people would think, but when you think about that CI/CD pipeline, that's exactly where it is. It's a pipeline. Security should not be seen as a blocker to that pipeline. So real quick, this is totally up to the organization and the stack, meaning the tools, the security tools that they're trying to use. But from a security perspective, we want to make sure we got our basics in place. And when I say basics, I mean we should be doing static code analysis. We should be doing dynamic application scanning, right? I put a little asterisk next to the dynamic application scanning. And the reason for that is static code analysis can be done in the developer's IDE, which is great. There's tons of commercial products out there that allow you to do it. But it can also be integrated into the pipeline itself. So there's a tool, a product called SendGrep, and it's in the references for you there. That is similar to SonarQube, but I've seen much more true positives come out of it. I highly recommend you guys take a look at it. It's fully automatable. You can integrate it directly into your CI/CD pipeline, and every time code gets committed to it, it'll quickly run through it and check if there's any obvious vulnerabilities. Right? It's not a silver bullet, but it's another layer to the onion of security. The reason I have an asterisk next to dynamic application scanning is because I said security should not be a blocker in your CI/CD pipeline, and I do mean that. But we can't just not be doing DAST scanning. The reason there's an asterisk is what I've seen work well in the past. Allow the developers to contribute code without blockers during the day. Conduct your DAS scanning at night when the developers are asleep, right? Take a look at what code was contributed to the code base, and assuming it's not breaking the build, spin up the API, let it be running, and then configure automated scans, right? That can scan against that API. So that the next morning when they come in, they'll realize, oh, there's SQL injection, or oh, there's command execution. I should take a look at that, right? And I mentioned here OWASP Zap because it fits in real nice with Jenkins, which is my personal favorite CI/CD pipeline server. But obviously, again, there's commercial tools out there that would certainly be available. All right, just in the interest of time, I'm gonna keep rolling through this, but we'll certainly have time for questions at the end. Here we have verification and testing. I've got good old Ronald Reagan here on the right, because we always want to trust but verify, right? At this point, security's been involved in the CI/CD process. We've been involved in the SSDLC. Now it's time for the pen test to happen, and this is where the truth comes out, right? Are we adhering to those architectural design patterns that we agreed to at the very beginning? Is the system configured as we expected it to? Is there open telnet? Is there, default credentials all over the place? Or has it been properly hardened? And then obviously application libraries, right? Did we use the application libraries we said we would? Are those deprecated? Do they already have vulnerabilities in them? These are the things that we should be looking for during the verification and testing phase. And obviously pen testing is hopefully, if we've done a good job so far, not going to come back with a bleeding report, but it's always good to have that sanity check for these applications. Last note I have here on verification and testing is, guys, pen testers should always be requesting access to the underlying code base. If they're not, you may want to consider a different pen tester, or at least some training for the in-house pen testers. As we're doing pen tests, we should want to understand why those vulnerabilities exist, right? Especially for the in-house pen testers, we need to go take a look at the code and see why those are, why they're there. And it also, looking at doing static code analysis is actually going to speed up your penetration test, because you can quickly reference it and look for vulnerabilities without having to bash your head against a keyboard trying to see if something is going to execute or not. Again, I linked the OWASP testing guide down here. It's great, obviously, for testing applications. It's specific to testing applications, APIs, things of that nature. And then also the P-test framework, which is the pen test execution standard. I think this is the last, yeah, it's the last slide here. All right, so we're not doing too bad. So we're here at the release and maintain, right? So at this point, the application's been tested. We identified the vulnerabilities. Hopefully there wasn't a whole lot. We can get those remediated. You want to obviously create tickets for that. You want to track those to remediation. And that's exactly what we're doing here in the release and maintain phase, right? A couple of things. A lot of this is kind of common sense, but just because it's common sense doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it, right? We want to watch for configuration drift. This is a cyclical process, meaning once the application's out there, it's not a set it and forget it thing, right? There's new 0 days that come up all the time. So we should be conducting ongoing application and network vulnerability scanning. One of the big ones I don't see often here is sunsetting products, right? And security's role in that. When products are being, when they're no longer being maintained and they're being phased out, that sunsetting process, security should have a say in that. And the reason for it, I've got a reference down here to a dangling DNS vulnerability. And that sounds dirty, but it's not. The whole point of this vulnerability is that, hey, if security is not involved in that sunsetting process, resources can be deprovisioned, but DNS records may not be removed. And what happens is, especially in the case of Azure, malicious cyber criminals will actually sit there and keep a list of all your DNS records. And if they see it's pointing to something, like Azure websites, and there's nothing sitting there, they can actually go claim that Azure website URL, knowing that you've got a record pointing directly to it from your organization, right? So if you've got example.acme.com, and that's your organization's, test bed, and you forget to remove that DNS record because security wasn't involved in the sunsetting process, now a cyber criminal can actually go spin up a website on Azure websites knowing, and they can grab that resource identifier that you've got linked from your DNS. And from everybody else's perspective, now it looks like example.acme.com is now pointing to a malicious phishing website or pornography website or whatever that may be. So just I use that example just to show the importance of, hey, once the product is out there, security still has a pretty significant role in making sure that the business doesn't take on risk, right? So that's it, guys. That's actually that's the presentation in a nutshell. Like Nigel said, I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. I know it's kind of a lot. Product security is it's exciting, but it's kind of a beast, right? So getting your hands wrapped around it is not always as quick and easy as we hope that it would be. But anyway, with all of that being said, I want to kind of just open up the floor and ask you guys, what are your questions? What are your questions around, embedding security in the CI/CD process? Maybe I've ran into those issues before, and hopefully I can give you some advice.
One of the things that comes to my mind is if a program has DevOps in place, where is a good place? Where's the most bang for your buck place to start?
Mm-hmm. No, that's perfect question. So I'm actually not going to say security training. That's not the best bang for the buck. It certainly has a lot of value, but unfortunately, man, there's just too many people out there that, they still have that mindset that, oh, I'm just being told to do this because it's a checkbox thing. I'm going to say it's actually the requirements phase, right? It's the, if you don't understand the business risk tolerance, or, not you, but the security team, if they don't understand the business risk tolerance, they can't effectively have those conversations with the software engineering team or the operations team. They can't. There's no teeth to their side of that development process, right? They can't enforce anything because everyone's going to say, well, the business doesn't care. The business says it's no big deal, so we're going to host this thing on a single Docker instance out on this box I got in the closet. It's not a problem. So, good question, though.
Sure.
Have you seen it? Have you personally seen better return on investment from from security? I don't think there's a one size fits all, and I think every organization is unique. I'd love to know if you've seen it play out better investing time elsewhere.
I've seen it play out worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the last place anybody wants to be is some external auditor or auditors coming through and saying, hey, your programmers need to have this sort of training, and then there's just a checkbox at that point. And then basically your security team is behind the curve trying to get something in place that's not necessarily the best case scenario. If you have something in place, like the requirements integration, it's a little easier to say that you're on top of it, and then you won't end up in this whole compliance versus security conundrum that people get in.
No, I totally agree. And, one of the things that I've seen work extremely well and something that we do, right, Breakthrough Security, we do offer, we have a thing called Full Circle Security, which involves consulting around all this, but we actually have a step 0 that we have in there, which is, hey, we're going to actually conduct a security assurance maturity exercise to understand, hey, where are we, right? What is the organization's current investment in security look like? Not necessarily monetary investment, but just where are the resources allocated? Where's the effort being focused? And that obviously helps everybody have an idea of, okay, well, if this is where we're currently at, where can we focus on to do exactly what you said, Nigel? Where can we focus on to be most impactful, right? Not just for compliance, but for overall security.
Yeah. Hey, this is Veena. I like the idea of having training, right, even before the requirements. I think that's a great idea and something that, not sure we are implementing it, but One of the challenges, and I'm a project manager with Aflac, so one of the challenges is we many a times get developers, especially contract, vendors who kind of join midway through the project and they come in for a certain amount of time and then they're out. So my thought process is, how do we make sure that they are, their time is baked into this training, or they start in the beginning of the project and, or the product development and they get trained. So
Yeah.
what are you?
No, that's a great question. That's a phenomenal question. So, and it's tough, right? Because what if the code that developer is committing and pushing to the branch is consistently prone to vulnerabilities, right? You don't want to slap them on the wrist too much, because eventually that you develop this adversarial relationship with the developers, which is something you never want from a security perspective. So what I've seen work well in the past is, and it's actually great for the organization to do this, is if you know that, hey, this is a contractor that we're continuously leveraging, it's best when it's somebody that maybe they're not full-time, but it's consistently kind of the same people that you reach out to, or the organization reaches out to. I would bring those people into that training session, which again, historically, I've seen the best payoff being from in-person training sessions, right? Because it allows developers and even the contract developers, it allows them to build a relationship, not just with the security team to see that, hey, we have faces, right? We're living, breathing people that you can talk to, and we're on your side. It builds that relationship so that they don't despise the security team, but it also builds the relationship with the organization, right? If that contractor knows, hey, this organization keeps reaching out to me to do work, not only am I getting compensated for it, but they care enough that they want me to be included as part of this training, right? So I get what you're saying. It's kind of tough, right, to bring them in kind of halfway through the process. It's not always easy, but unfortunately, I don't think there is a silver bullet for that problem. That's kind of my best. That's kind of my best solution at this point, is to see if you can bring them in. If you know you're going to leverage them later on in the process, or even on future projects, bring them in early so they can feel like they're being valued and invested in by the organization.
Yeah, and there's a perfect ROI for management as well, when it comes to budget, saying that, hey, bring them in early, let them get trained, and it's worth your money. Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Yep. And I wish, that's just one of the things about, I think, our field in general, information security. A lot of us are very passionate about teaching and engaging others. But as far as, I think OWASP has done a phenomenal job about putting out, the ASVS and, the threat modeling tool, and they've got all sorts of stuff. They've got a whole web app pen test process that they've published for people to go out and read. But having face-to-face training, short of going to conferences or joining ISSA chapters like this, it's just, I think a lot of it stems from generating an initial interest from the developers in security, and building that dynamic of, hey, we're all on the same team here, right? Don't look at us as your opponent. We're trying to work with you to get this thing shipped as quick as possible. So, and we talk about security champions in the agile world. If more organizations would take that on, of enabling the developers to kind of wear that security hat, that certainly goes a long way as well.
Absolutely.
Nigel, I think I've chewed up the full hour.
Yeah, we are at time. Are there any more questions that anybody would like to throw out there before we call this the end of the session?
Thank you, Cornel.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks you guys for having me out again. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Cornel.
Yep.
We appreciate you coming through and having this, or hosting this event. I guess we're kind of hosting it, but thank you for your presentation within our event. All right. Well, with that, thank you all for jumping into this call, and you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Nigel. You too. Thank you, Cornel.
Bye-bye.